Okay, here's a short video just to give you a little bit of an idea of how this, trig review, what picture is it assignment works. And so really, as you can see this triangle over here on the left, we just kind of want to do one of our normal trig problems, right? And so when I say trig, we're talking solving for x in this triangle by using our sine function or cosine or tangent, all right? And so we just want to solve for x in this triangle. But we do have a few questions that we have to answer along the way. And you see those here on the left side. Question 1, question 2, question 3, and question 4. Now, these boxes over here that are highlighted, and when I say highlighted, like they have the kind of the bold outlined boxes, this is where we're going to put our answers for 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then notice in question number 4, it says it's multiple choice, right? Type the letter of your answer choice. So when we solve this, we should get one of these, A, B, C, and D, and then that'll be our answer for question 4. So the first thing I want to do is let's just kind of get rid of all these things and let's solve this problem, all right? And so when we do problems like this, remember the first thing we're always going to do is let's circle the angle that is given to us. And then we need to label on our triangle the opposite side, the hypotenuse side, and the adjacent side. And so from our angle, if we look across from that angle, that's going to be pointing at the opposite side of our triangle. So I'm going to put an O by our 12 here. That's the opposite side. And then I like to go to the hypotenuse next. Our hypotenuse is always across from our 90-degree angle. So I go to the 90, draw an arrow across from that as well, and that's going to be pointing at the hypotenuse. And so x is on our hypotenuse side. And then that just means that our third side, which in this triangle is on the top, that's our adjacent side, all right? Now, in most of these problems, only two of our sides are going to have known information. And so in this triangle, that's x and that's 12. And so again, x is on the hypotenuse side, 12 is on the opposite side. And so we want to use the sides that have information on them. And so in this one, I'm going to scribble out A at the top because our adjacent side is blank, and so it can't help us here. But we definitely want to use our opposite side, and we want to use our hypotenuse side to be able to solve for x. And so now we kind of just want to think about our acronym, Sohcahtoa, right? These things stand for, the first one is sine equals opposite divided by hypotenuse. That's what So stands for. The Ka part is cosine equals adjacent divided by hypotenuse. And the Toa part is tangent equals opposite divided by adjacent. And so now that we have identified which sides we're going to use, again, that's our opposite side and our hypotenuse side, we want to set this up with our trig function, with our angle in parentheses, and then the O and the H in our fraction. And so which trig function we use is our next important part. If we look down at Sohcahtoa, we want to look for where we see an O and an H together. And we see that right here in the beginning, right, in the So part. And so since we're working with O and H, we have to use our function that starts with S, which is our sine. And so I'm going to write down sine, and then we know that when we do this, our calculator is going to ask us to put something in parentheses, and that's going to be our angle measure. So remember, our angle measure is 62 degrees. So I'm going to put a 62 in there, and then that's going to equal our fraction. And our fraction is where the O and the H come into play. And since O comes first, that's going to be on top of our fraction. And so our O side is 12. So 12 goes on top. And then since H comes second, that's going to be on the bottom, and that's where x is. And so x is going to go on the bottom of this fraction. And then once we get to this part, we can just, we want to solve this, right? We want to solve this for x. And so we do that by putting our sine over 1, and now we can cross multiply and solve for x. And so when we do that, we get two different multiplications. Sine of 62 times x, that's this one, and then the other one is 1 times 12. And so the sine of 62 plus x is still just that. I'm going to write it as x times the sine of 62. And then that's going to equal 1 times 12. And 1 times 12 is just 12. Now, remember, we need to get x by itself. Right now, we have x times the sine of 62. We don't want it to be times by the sine of 62, and so we need to get that off of this side and onto the other side. In order to do that, we need to do the opposite of that. And so since it's being times by sine of 62, the opposite of that would be divide by the sine of 62. Now, remember in algebra, we must do that to both sides. So we'll divide both sides by the sine of 62. And then on the left, when we do that, times by the sine of 62 and divide by the sine of 62 cancel, and it just leaves you with x by itself. And so that's awesome. I'll write that over here. We've now got x equals, and it equals this fraction right here, 12 divided by sine of 62. Now, we don't want to leave it in that form. We want to get a decimal or, just whatever number it equals. And so let's go type this big fraction into Desmos. And when we do, we will get an actual number for that, all right? And so I'm going to pull up my Desmos screen. And remember, a couple things. We need to be in degree mode because we're working with angles, right? 62 degrees. And so the first thing we should double check is, are we actually in degree mode? So click the wrench up here. And notice my radians is highlighted. And so I need to click degrees now. And once I click degrees, now I'm in degree mode. And then once I'm in degree mode, everything's set up for me. So I can go click into this bar over here. And then I just want to type in what we had written down over there. And as you can see, it's 12 divided by sine of 62. And so I'm going to write 12 and then the divide button. And then remember, sine is in this functions menu. It's the top left. And under that, you see cosine and tangent as well. Sometimes you'll be using that, right? So we'll type sine, since that's what this one's about, and then 62. And you can see our answer right here, 13.59. And we'll see kind of what our choices are. Maybe we can round that to 13.6. And so we come back. I'm going to write 13.6 down. And that's the answer to the problem, all right? Now, let's real quick now answer the 4 questions that they actually have, right? We have now solved for x, but that's not all that we need to do in this picture review, okay? We now need to answer question 1, question 2, question 3, and question 4. And so question 1 says, x is which side in relation to the 62-degree angle? We're going to type HYP for hypotenuse, OPP for opposite, or ADJ for adjacent. And so it's asking, where is x? And right, we put a big H by the x side. And so we would put hypotenuse in here, HYP. And then the next question says 12 is which side in relation to the 62-degree angle? So we go up to the 12 side, and we put a big O there. So that means opposite, right? And so they want us to write OPP for opposite. So in this box, we would write OPP. Now notice it says don't capitalize, right? And so we want everything lowercase when we type it in here. Now, third says which trig function lets us solve for x. So that's asking what we use, sine, cosine, or tangent. And so if you come down and look at the work we did, right, you can see we did sine, the sine of 62. And so they just want us to type SIN there. And so we would put SIN in this box. And then finally, number 4, it says, solve for x. So what did we get? We got 13.6. You'll see that is answer B. And now they want us to just put A, B, C, or D in there. And so those are capital letters, so I would write a capital B. And those answers the 4 questions there. Now, I'm doing this not on the actual Google Sheet. And so I'm going to go over there now, and we're going to retype those in, and then let's look at what happens over in these gray boxes, all right? So our 4 answers were hypotenuse, opposite, sine, and B. And so I think I've got it right here. Perfect. Now, if I click into this box, right? Now, what side is x on? We said it was the hypotenuse side, so HYP. And then once I do that, let's pull this down, and I scroll over, now you'll notice some orange squares popped up, right? Because I got it right. That's your answer key. If I delete that and then click out of there, notice the orange squares go away. So every time you get an answer right here, it puts up some color. And ultimately, if you get them all right, it's going to make a specific picture. And so let's put them all in here. Remember, the next one was opposite. So for this one, I'll put OPP. And there's some more color. And then remember, we use the sine function for the next one. They want us to write SIN. And so when I do that, more color. And then finally, we got letter B for our answer, this time capital. So I'll put a capital B in there. When I click out of that cell, boom, even more color, right? And so that's the goal here, to fill in these answers correctly, and you'll know you got it right when color appears. If no color appears, then you unfortunately did not get it right, all right? Now, I do want to talk about one more. That's how basically half of these go. The other half has to do with finding angle measures. So still using sine, cosine, and tangent, but the -1 versions. So let's go back here, and I've got another problem for us, all right? And so let's do this one, and then we'll go type the answers in after that, all right? And so this starts the same way. We always circle the angle we're working with. This time, we want to find this angle, but obviously it's still the angle we're working with, all right? And then from there, we still highlight opposite, hypotenuse, and adjacent. And so across from that angle, that's going to be pointing at our opposite side. So that's where 20 is. And then our hypotenuse side is always across from the 90. And so that is pointing at the side where there's a 33. And then our third side has got to be our adjacent side. And once again, the adjacent side is blank. And so as we go to answer this question, we will not be using the blank side. And so I'm going to scribble out A, all right? Now, I'm going to remind us about Sohcahtoa, because now it's time to pick which function we need to use. And remember, it's dictated by which sides we have information on. And so that could be opposite, hypotenuse, or adjacent. And in this problem, we have information on our opposite side and our hypotenuse side again. And so O and H, we see that here in the first function. So that means we need to use the so part, and the S starts with sine. And so we need to use the sine here. And so I'm going to write sine. And then in parentheses, we have to put our angle. Now, what is our angle? It's just a question mark. And so I'm literally going to put a question mark in there. That's like our variable. We're solving for question mark this time. Now, our trig function has to equal our fraction. And our fraction, since O comes first, the O thing needs to be on top, and then the H thing on the bottom. And so our opposite side is 20. That goes on top of our fraction. And then the hypotenuse side is 33. And so that's got to go on the bottom. Now, notice this one's different than the other ones. The other one had, x in our fraction. And so we had to cross multiply to get x by itself. This time what we are solving for is the question mark. It's in a vastly different spot than before. This time it's locked within our function. And so we can get that out of our function. We can get question mark by itself if we do the -1 version of our function. We call that the inverse of our function. So we still want to use sine, but we need to use sine -1. And then that's going to require that we put something into parentheses again, and what goes in the parentheses is just the fraction that we set up. And so in our sine -1 parentheses, we'll put 20 divided by 33. And then this right here is what we need to type into Desmos, all right? And so we'll go back to our Desmos screen. Here it is. And we'll click into box number 2. Real quick, double check the wrench to make sure you are in degree mode. It should stay for a little while, but I just like to double check every time. So I'll click back into 2. Let's remind ourselves what we need to type. Oops, here it is. Sine of -1, and then in the parentheses, 20 divided by 33. And so we come back, and we go back into our functions menu, because that's where sine is. But this time we need -1. All the -1s are in the middle column. And so we click sine -1 at the top, and then 20 divided by 33. And this is going to tell us what our angle is, all right? So it says 37.3. And so we'll come back, and we can write that down. Equals 37.3 degrees. Now, notice this time there's only one question. Solve for the missing angle question mark. But it says round to the nearest degree. That means we don't want any decimals. And so we would round this down, right? We don't want this 0.3. That would just be rounded down. And so our final answer here in the bar is going to be 37. And so let's go back to our Google Sheet, and let's make sure that 37 is the right answer, right? We can see some more color pop up on our gray screen. So I'm going to scroll down to where that problem is. It's right here. For 19, we will put the number 37 in there. Click out of there, and let's go back up and make sure some more color popped up. And sure enough, there we have it kind of in the middle of the screen, the dark orange there. And so that's basically how this thing works. You just solve these problems, and then you type those answers into the little outline boxes. And if you're right, color will pop up. If you're wrong, color won't. And so then you can go back and give it another shot, right? All right, I hope this helps. Thank you for your question, Have a great day.